Hey guys, tonight we drift back in time, way back to a cold, wind-blown medieval village where the sky isn't just something to admire, it's something to fear. Overhead, a jagged streak of burning light cuts across the blackness. It doesn't make a sound, it just appears, glowing, growing, like the sky has been torn open. You feel it before you see it. The stillness, the silence, the way even the dogs stop barking. A comet. And to you standing there in the mud in woolen boots, that thing isn't just beautiful, it's terrifying. Because in this world, everything up there means something down here. You probably won't survive this, by the way. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is it where you are? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're outside staring up at that impossible light in the sky. It's long, it's smoky, and it doesn't belong. Nobody told you it would be there. There was no sundog, no eclipse, no slow fade like the moon does. Just this sudden flaming ribbon, like God cracked the heavens with a whip. Your neighbors are whispering prayers. Some cross themselves, others bolt their doors. A baby starts crying. Someone's goat has vanished, gone into the woods maybe. But the timing feels off. Everything feels off. That's what comets do in the Middle Ages. They make reality wobble. This isn't a moment of scientific curiosity. It's not, ooh, look at the comet. It's, oh no, your spine tightens. You've heard the stories. Everyone has. Comets mean death, or war, or famine, maybe all three. And when the sky sends a signal, the land listens. The year doesn't matter, really, because across the Middle Ages, this exact fear repeats. Every time a comet appears, it's like the whole village is holding its breath. The church doesn't offer much comfort either. You'd think the clergy would have some rational explanations. But nope, the priest just preached a sermon on signs and portents. Quoting the book of Matthew, "There shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars." And when people asked what the comet meant, he said, "God is warning us." Great. There's something uniquely frightening about a heavenly warning when no one knows what the warning is about. It's like getting a mysterious letter in red ink that just says, soon. And so your imagination fills in the blanks, and boy, do people's imaginations run wild. You've heard tales. One farmer swore that after the last comet, his crops failed for 5 years. Another woman claims her brother saw one the night before his village burned down. And the old man at the edge of town, he still tells the story of the time he saw a comet that looked like a flaming sword slicing across the stars. No one remembers what year it was, of course. But that doesn't matter, because in this world, comets aren't just things. They're messengers, harbingers. They're the sky's way of telling you, brace yourself. Even chroniclers got dramatic. You may not be able to read or write, but the monks up at the abbey, they do. And one of them you heard once wrote, "In the year of our Lord, a fearful star appeared long in tail and red like blood, which did strike terror into the hearts of men." Imagine that being copied over and over in scriptoria for centuries. No wonder no one feels safe when a comet appears. You duck inside finally. The hearth's glow is warm, but not enough to stop the thoughts buzzing in your skull. Could the comet mean the king will die? Or maybe it's about the nearby river, which has been rising too fast. What if it's about you? What if it's already chosen? Historians still argue whether medieval people believed comets were divine punishments, natural occurrences, or just celestial coincidences. Honestly, it probably depended on who you asked and how recently something awful had happened. If your barn just collapsed or your cousin caught the plague, then yeah, that comet definitely brought it. And even when nothing bad happened, people assumed that meant the comet was just warning them, and they were still in danger. The strangest thing is, comets aren't rare. You might see 2 or 3 in your lifetime, but each one feels singular, as if the universe is doing this just to you. You sleep badly that night. You dream of fire and hoofbeats and the sound of a church bell ringing even though no one is pulling the rope. You dream of a sky on fire. You wake up sweating and the comet is still there, still hanging, still watching. It doesn't move like other stars. It lingers. Comets don't blink out. They fade slowly. They burn across days or weeks, dragging people's fear out as long as they possibly can. By day 5, people are starting to expect disaster. When nothing terrible happens by day 7, the mood shifts. Is it over? Is the worst still coming? You know that eventually the comet will vanish. The sky will settle. The fear will loosen its grip. But you also know something else. Next time when that fiery tail appears again, people will still gasp, still pray, still whisper old stories by candlelight. Because once you've looked up and seen something in the stars that doesn't belong, you never forget. You wake early, maybe even before the roosters. There's a kind of silence outside that doesn't feel natural, like the air's holding its breath. When you step outside your cottage, you don't even have to look up, you feel it. The comet is still there. Not a dot, not a twinkle, but a long, thin streak with a ghost tail that seems to float, even though it's clearly moving slowly across the sky. It doesn't belong and it knows it, and so does everyone else. In town they're already gathering. The baker's fire isn't lit. The forge is cold. No one's bothering with trade today. You walk into the square, and it's a sea of turned faces, heads tilted up, mouths open. Some are muttering, others cry. A group of children starts to chant something that sounds like a rhyme, but no one's really paying attention. Not to them, anyway. They're watching the sky. One old woman clutches a rosary so tight her knuckles go white. A merchant is arguing with a priest, not even whispering, just full-blown shouting, and you catch a few phrases as you get closer. It's the devil's whip, God's judgment. No, it's a sword. It's war. It always means war. You've heard these stories before, but now they're being told like facts, not fairy tales. Because once that comet appeared, everyone reverted to the same primal instinct: interpret or perish. You slide into the crowd trying not to draw attention. But you're curious because something about this feels different. Not just fear, conviction. It's like everyone has already decided what this comet means, even if none of them agree. A woman nearby declares it's because the king sinned with his brother's wife. The man next to her mutters, "No, it's because we hung the wrong man last spring." And then there's the bearded monk with wild eyes who keeps whispering, "It's famine, famine, famine," like he's trying to summon it faster by saying it 3 times. You start to realize something. People don't just fear comets, they use them. Because in a world without scientific consensus, a comet becomes the ultimate cosmic Rorschach test. Whatever people already feared or hated or felt guilty about it all gets projected into the tail of that flaming arc. You don't need a telescope, you need a grudge. This isn't just a curiosity to the peasants either. No, up in the castle, if you had access, you'd find the same panic playing out in silk instead of wool. Nobles calling their astrologers, advisors paging through ancient texts, a clerk reading aloud from Pliny the Elder in hopes of decoding the meaning. Because here's the thing, medieval leaders were just as terrified of comets as their subjects, maybe even more. At least a peasant could blame the comet for his cow going dry. A king. He had an entire nation to lose, and they took this seriously, very seriously. A comet could mean rebellion, or invasion, or divine disapproval of policy. And if you were on the throne, that meant divine disapproval of you. One story tells of a medieval king. Some say it was Louis the Fat of France, who ordered fasting and public penance across his realm when a comet appeared. He feared it meant his days were numbered. Spoiler alert, they were. He died not long after. Historians still argue whether this kind of causality was widely believed or just a convenient explanation after the fact. But at the time, if a ruler died and there'd been a comet a few months earlier, everyone linked them. You think of the stars now, how stable they seem. Familiar, permanent. And then you think of that comet, the interloper, the rogue. It doesn't blink in rhythm like the planets. It slashes across the sky like a warning you didn't know you needed. And because you live in a world ruled by signs and symbols, every person starts making their own version of the prophecy. Someone saw a 3-headed calf born last week. A bad omen. Someone else's well turned sour. A sure sign. And then there's the child who fell from a hayloft last night, survived, but her mother insists she heard voices just before the fall. It's all connected now. Because once a comet shows up, everything becomes meaningful. The church doesn't offer clarity either. In fact, it's adding fuel. You visit a chapel later that day, just to light a candle, and there's a sermon already in full swing. The priest is sweating, his voice trembles, and he's reading from Revelation. He doesn't name the comet, but he doesn't have to. Everyone knows what he means when he says, "And the stars of the sky fell to the earth as figs drop from a fig tree when shaken by a strong wind." You kneel, half praying, half listening. There's incense in the air, and it's heavy, oppressive. You're not even sure what you're asking for. Safety, forgiveness, or just a sign that the sign means nothing. Later outside, you overhear two boys daring each other to look directly at it, like it's a monster they can tame. One swears he saw an eye in the comet's head. The other claims it's getting closer. You don't say it aloud, but part of you believes both. In a world where light comes only from the sun, the moon, or fire something this bright doesn't feel safe. It feels invasive. It pierces the dark like it wants to be seen. You wonder if it's staring back. Here's a strange thing you learn from a traveler passing through in some regions. Comets are called hairy stars because of the tail, because it looks like it has a mane. You imagine it galloping through the sky like some wild beast, untamed, unstoppable. There's also talk of comets as dragons, of course. In some old manuscripts, they're drawn with mouths open, spewing fire. Entire sky serpents with glowing bodies and teeth. Not metaphors, actual beliefs. A comet isn't just a star with a tail. It's a beast with a message. And what's worse, no one knows how to read it. You pass an apothecary's hut, and he's set up a stall outside. He's selling dried sage bundles and little iron tokens. He swears they'll shield your house from sky-born plague. A woman buys 5. Another asks if she should bury hers under the threshold or hang it on her door. Neither is right. Neither is wrong. You realize that fear makes people ritualize. And if no one gives them a ritual, they'll invent one. That's where superstition is born, not in ignorance, but in the hunger for control. That night you try to sleep. The sky is too clear. The comet is brighter. Its tail seems longer. You roll over in your straw bed, pull the blanket up, but the glow leaks through the window. You remember what someone said in the tavern earlier. It doesn't come from the sky. It comes through it. You don't know what that means, but you understand the fear behind it. Because whether it's a divine torch or a devil's eye, one thing's for certain, it's not ours. And that is the part that truly haunts. You're barely used to seeing the comet up there, still smearing the sky like a wound, when the whispers begin to turn into warnings. And the warnings, well, they're suddenly coming from people who normally don't say much. The steward's wife, who never speaks above a whisper, is loudly insisting in the village square that the king will fall before the tail does. You're not even sure what that means, but it sounds serious. Serious enough to make people pause mid-step. Suddenly everyone's talking about the king, because when a comet appears in the medieval sky, it doesn't just point to vague misfortune. It points directly at power, at monarchs, at rulers, at anyone important enough to have their sins tallied by the heavens. The idea is so widespread it's practically doctrine. Comets signal the fall of kings. You wouldn't say it aloud, but honestly, you're not too surprised. Monarchs die all the time, but when they die during a comet, people remember it forever. Take William the Conqueror, for example. You've probably never met him, obviously, but you know the name. Everyone does. You've heard he was brutal, big, fierce. But here's the wild part. Before he ever crossed the English Channel in 1066, a comet flared across the sky. Not just any comet, Halley's Comet. You didn't know it had a name. Back then no one did, but it streaked across Europe and everyone panicked. In Normandy, people saw it as an omen of war. In England, they saw it as the death knell of King Harold. And sure enough, within months, Harold was dead. William was crowned, and history was written with blood and fire. Historians still argue whether the comet's appearance actually influenced William's decisions or just conveniently aligned with his ambitions. But people at the time, they absolutely believed the stars had chosen sides. And from that point on, Halley's Comet became a kind of cosmic headline. You walk past the church and notice a new page pinned on the outer board. It's a woodcut, clumsy, rushed, but you can make out a long-tailed star, and beside it a crowned figure lying sideways, a sword through his chest. It's not even subtle. Someone's decided what the comet means. This time another king must die. It's terrifying how fast these things escalate. You hear someone mention that a neighboring lord has already fled his manor. Another swears the royal court has moved locations 3 times in the last week to avoid the shadow. Whether it's the shadow of the comet or metaphorical doom, no one's quite sure. But once rulers start moving, the rest of the realm notices. And here's the thing, you start to see it differently now. Before it was just fear. Now it's expectation. Some people aren't terrified anymore. Some are hopeful. You catch wind of a murmur in the tavern. Let it come. Let the crown change hands. It's time. A blacksmith face smudged with soot nods slowly. The king never cared for us anyway. That's when it hits you. Comets aren't just celestial warnings. They're opportunities to shift blame, to dream of change, to rationalize rebellion. If things are bad, a comet means God agrees with you. You think of all the monarchs who've died under comets, or rather, who had the misfortune of comets appearing just before their deaths. Emperor Justinian II, Pope Calixtus III, the Ming Emperor in far-off China, all of them marked by flame in the sky. It's easy, of course, to look backward and assign meaning. Harder to predict what will happen now. But that doesn't stop people from trying. You see a traveling friar draw a rough horoscope in the dirt with a stick. He talks of houses and alignments of Jupiter in Aries and Mars in opposition, and how the fire sword of the Lord shall strike where pride lives. Sounds poetic, sounds dangerous. That night you have another dream. You're standing in a stone hall. A crown lies on the floor beside you, scorched and cracked. The comet burns through the stained glass windows above. No one else is in the room. You reach down to touch the crown, but it turns to ash. You wake up breathing heavy. You don't tell anyone, because people have been executed for dreams before. Days pass. The comet stays. Rumors spread faster than bread. They say the queen hasn't been seen in public. They say the king has fallen ill. They say a noble family was burned out of their manor by lightning. No storm, just a bolt from the blue. You hear a tale that makes your skin crawl. A shepherd near the coast swears he saw two suns, the real one and another glowing in the sky beside the comet. No one believes him, but still. People look up more often now. They're searching for patterns, duplicates, double meanings. Everyone's waiting for the comet to claim someone. There's an irony in how everyone talks about kings falling while forgetting how commoners also die during comets. A local widow says her husband collapsed the night the comet appeared. A child drowned last Tuesday. But those deaths don't count, apparently. They're not symbolic enough, because that's how medieval fear works. It doesn't move evenly. It moves upward to the throne, to the elite, to the ones people secretly resent or openly adore. A comet gives everyone permission to believe that the system is about to crack. And if that system includes a corrupt bishop or a tyrant lord, then maybe the sky really is fair after all. You stop at the Abbey Gate one morning and see something strange, a monk burning pages. You lean in, curious. He glances up and says flatly, "The signs were wrong." He throws another page into the fire. We read them wrong, or they changed. You ask, "What signs?" He doesn't answer. He just says, "When the tail points south, the crown falls." But it changed. Now it points west. You don't know what that means. And honestly, neither does he. But you both stand there a moment, listening to the crackle, watching the pages curl, and above you, the comet just hangs, unmoving, uncaring, silent, but very much heard. You know the comet's still there before you even open your eyes. It's like having a sore tooth. You don't need to look in a mirror to know it hasn't healed overnight. The fear, the tension, the charged air that smells faintly of ash and cold iron, it's all there, soaking into your bones like damp through stone. But today the whispers have shifted. The comet hasn't gone anywhere, but the mood on the ground has. It's sharper, edgier. People aren't just talking anymore, they're doing. Because when a comet hangs long enough in the sky, something else always arrives alongside it. Blame. You step outside and the first thing you hear is shouting 3 houses down near the old well. A group has surrounded a girl with wild hair and bare feet. She's screaming, but not with fear, with fury. Someone calls her a witch. Someone else says she made a pig lame last winter, and they'd known she was trouble since. The comet's just the excuse. In medieval life, most people barely had a grip on what caused disease, famine, floods, or fire. But one thing they could control, sort of, was the act of naming a cause. And comets, with all their silent screaming across the heavens, gave people permission to point fingers. Witches, Jews, strangers, hermits, that odd family who keeps to themselves in the woods. When the comet won't leave the sky, you realize it's not just predicting doom, it's demanding a target. You watch the crowd swell around the girl. She's pushed. She stumbles. Someone shouts, "Burn her!" And it's like a spell breaks loose in the air. Not magic, just panic disguised as righteousness. You turn away because you know this won't end with reason. It never does. You've seen it before, haven't you? Every time the stars behave strangely, people behave worse. It's like fear rots the part of the brain that thinks critically. And if fear doesn't do it, desperation will. That's when the scapegoats start piling up. You walk toward the edge of the village and remember stories from the last comet. How a family was driven out after their dog gave birth to a litter of eyeless pups. Someone said it was a curse, said it was linked. No proof needed. Even back then, the priest didn't intervene. The comet wasn't just in the sky, it was in the sermons. There's a paradox you begin to notice. The longer the comet stays, the less people care about truth. Instead, they want resolution, even if it's ugly, even if it means violence. In some parts of Europe, they say entire communities would hold fasts and flagellation processions when a comet appeared. Bare backs, chains, blood. Because if the gods or God were angry, then maybe pain would buy mercy. But not all towns have the same approach. Yours, it starts looking for witches. You overhear someone say they saw a comet-born curse in their field, 3 dead crows in a perfect line. Another claims her husband's eyes turned cloudy after staring too long at the tail. And now, just like that ocular omen, becomes the newest theory. Historians still argue whether medieval societies truly believed these signs or just performed belief because it was safer than being skeptical. But to the people living it, there wasn't much room for doubt, because doubt was dangerous. Doubt meant hesitation, and hesitation could make you the next scapegoat. You duck into the bakery, what's left of it, and find the baker sitting in the corner, arms wrapped around his knees. No loaves today, just silence and ash. You ask if he's all right. He says quietly, "They came last night, took my cousin, said she cursed the miller's child. You know his cousin, she's 16. She's never cursed anything in her life. But her hair is white, not gray, not pale, but snow white. Unnatural, otherworldly. That was all it took. You offer to sit with him. He doesn't answer. The dough on the counter has gone hard. That evening, the wind changes, blows from the east, carries with it the sound of bells, not the usual kind, not for mass. These are slow tolls, mourning tones. Someone died. Someone always does. But when a comet is in the sky, death doesn't just mean sorrow. It means suspicion. Was it natural? Was it foretold? Was it deserved? You walk toward the noise and find a small crowd near the chapel. A man lies on a cart, face covered. A priest mumbles rites, but no one's really listening. All eyes are on a woman across the square, the widow. A midwife leans toward you and whispers, "She had a dream last week, said death would come." You want to say everyone dreams that when the sky is on fire, but you keep it to yourself. People start making charms. That's new. They take iron nails, bits of ash crosses drawn in chalk. One family strings chicken bones above their door. Another hangs garlic. Someone digs a trench around their house just in case. It's not about logic anymore. It's about ritual. If you do something, anything, maybe the comet will move on. That's how fragile people are. They know the tail up there is made of fire and ice. They know it's miles away. But somehow, smearing ash on a doorstep makes them feel not safe exactly, just less helpless. And that's all fear really wants. You visit the market square again. It's different now. The sellers are gone. Their stalls stand empty like teeth in an old man's gums. In their place drawings, symbols, messages scratched into stone with charcoal. One says, "She walks with the tail." Another, "Judged by the sky." A third just shows a stick figure, burning arms raised. You've never seen these before. You didn't know people could create a language of panic, but apparently they can. It spreads like wildfire, just like fear. You overhear a conversation between two young men by the well. One says he's heard of a village to the north where they tied a blindfolded woman to a tree and left her overnight. If she was alive in the morning, she was innocent. She wasn't. The other says they're doing the same here soon. And suddenly you realize the comet isn't just above you. It's inside you now. It's woven into the air, into the eyes of the people around you, into the way everyone glances sideways at strangers and holds children closer and prays without moving their lips. It doesn't matter what the comet is. You're starting to realize something unnerving. The longer the comet lingers in the sky, the more the rules start to unravel. It begins subtly. People skipping mass market days, thinning out livestock left untended. But then it escalates. The constable stops patrolling. The steward ignores thefts. No one wants to be the one enforcing order when the stars seem ready to swallow the world whole. Because when a comet hovers overhead for days, then weeks, it changes more than moods. It changes reality. You walk through the village square and see it plainly. Something's different in the eyes of everyone. A sharpness, a loosening. The usual sense of, "Don't do that, it's wrong," has been replaced with, "Do it quickly before the sky falls." The blacksmith's apprentice has started hoarding tools, not stealing exactly, just keeping them safe, he says. The miller's son hasn't shown up for work in 3 days. Rumor says he's gone into the hills to fast and wait for the end. Even the priest, usually so firm and serene, has been spotted talking to his own reflection in the baptismal font. You start to feel like the comet is bending. Everything, like the gravity of it is so strong it's not just pulling dust and light, it's pulling behavior, making people behave in ways they'd never even consider during normal times. But then again, what is normal when the sky itself is writing new laws? You visit the town's edge where the forest begins. There, a small hut sits crooked on a slope, one of those places people politely avoid. Inside lives a man called Jorik. He's not quite a hermit, not quite a healer, not quite right in the head either. But today, Jorik has an audience. You see a line forming. People carrying bread, eggs, coins, whatever they can trade for answers. Jorik has seen comets before you're told. He knows the meaning. He understands the tale. Curious, you linger. Jorik sits inside, draped in animal hides, his hair thick and gray like storm clouds. He doesn't look up, just mutters as each villager enters, "Don't ask. Listen." And then he speaks. Sometimes it's cryptic. When the tale breaks, so does the river. Sometimes it's eerily precise. The baker's next child will have no voice. You wait your turn, not because you believe, but because, well, you're not sure you don't. When you step inside, he stares past you and says, "The shadow you fear is not in the sky. It's in your reflection." You leave before he can say more. In the days that follow, you notice something truly strange. People start making decisions they've been avoiding for years. A man leaves his wife. A daughter runs away from home. A widow sells her family farm and disappears. It's as if the comet has pressed a fast-forward button on everyone's lives. The logic is unspoken, but obvious. If we're all doomed anyway, why wait? And doom, you realize, is oddly freeing. It lets people throw off chains they didn't even know they wore. Historians still argue whether these shifts in behavior were rational responses to cosmic terror or unconscious coping mechanisms. But either way, they happened again and again across villages, towns, kingdoms. Wherever a comet burned in the heavens, people unspooled. One evening you sit in the grass just outside the village. The night air is quiet. The comet glows a pale orange, now slightly dimmer, but still there, still burning its slow trail toward forgetfulness. You hear footsteps beside you. It's the weaver's boy, maybe 14. He sits down without a word, then says softly, "Do you think we're being punished?" You don't know what to say. He continues, "My brother stole a sheep last year. My father beat him so hard, he still limps. And now the comet's here. I think God saw." You want to tell him it's not about sheep, it's not about his brother, but you also don't want to lie. So you just say, maybe it's not punishment. Maybe it's a reminder. He nods like that helps, like that gives the sky a gentler face. You sit there together until the wind picks up and the chill sends you both home. You pass the tavern and hear laughter, not mockery, not hysteria, just laughter. People gathered around a table drinking, telling stories. Someone's playing a flute off key. For a moment you forget the comet exists. Then someone jokes, "Drink now, the tail might drop on us by dawn," and everyone roars. It's gallows humor, sure, but it's also resistance. You realize something beautiful and a little heartbreaking in the face of cosmic dread. People will still seek warmth, still tell stories, still love, still sing. The stars may predict doom, but the human heart, it rebels. That night you have a dream. You're walking through a city, one you've never seen before. Massive stone walls, tall towers. The comet overhead is so large it touches the ground like a bridge of fire. People are walking on it, carrying lanterns, laughing. A voice says, "It's not a warning, it's a path." You wake up crying. You don't know why, but you remember the dream perfectly. The comet finally begins to fade. It's so slow you almost don't notice at first, like a stain losing color. Each night, it's a little less sharp, a little less furious. The tail shortens, the brightness softens. People stop looking up as often. The goat that vanished 2 weeks ago wanders back into town. The baker makes bread again. Even the priest seems steadier in his voice. No one says it out loud, but you can feel the shift the comet may leave. But something else has taken root. You are not the same. The comet will vanish soon. But you'll remember what it did, how it twisted time and thinned the veil between sense and belief. How it made people afraid, made others bold. How it gave permission for truth, for lies, for cruelty, for kindness. Because a comet doesn't just burn across the sky, it burns through the stories people tell about the world. And those stories, whether of doom, change, or wonder, don't fade with the light. They linger, just like you. You don't notice it at first, but the silence is different now. Not the quiet of calm, but the kind of hush that follows something too big to talk about. The comet still streaks the sky, faint, yes, but still stubbornly visible. And yet people have stopped pointing, stopped whispering, stopped naming names. Now they look inward, because after the panic, after the scapegoats and the feverish prophecies, comes something much heavier: guilt. You feel it creeping in like a draft under the door. Not yours necessarily, though. Maybe there's something you wish you hadn't said, someone you didn't defend. But you see it etched into faces everywhere, especially the ones who shouted the loudest when the tale was brightest. It's the guilt of survival, the guilt of accusation, the guilt of hoping the comet would take someone else. And now that it didn't, now that the fire in the sky has dulled, those people are looking over their shoulders, because the tale may fade, but the memory of what you did during it doesn't. You pass the town square and notice the boards have been scrubbed clean. The drawings, the messages, the threats, they're all gone. Someone took a cloth and soap and erased the panic. It's supposed to be comforting, but it isn't, because now there's just nothing, and nothing is often worse. It invites the imagination to fill the gap. You see the blacksmith again. He doesn't meet your eyes. just nods once and keeps hammering. His apprentice, remember him, isn't around anymore. No one talks about it. That's how it goes after these things. The story changes mid-chapter. One day you're screaming about omens, and the next you pretend you were calm the whole time. It's an unspoken deal. The town agrees. We won't bring it up if you don't. But you remember. The priest gives a sermon the next morning. He speaks of mercy. He quotes the book of Jonah, how Nineveh was spared when its people repented, how sometimes God's anger is not punishment, but a chance. You sit in the back pew and watch heads nod slowly. It's a new message, a softer one. No more talk of fire and judgment, just forgiveness. And yet, it feels hollow, because while people may ask for mercy, they rarely offer it first. You glance at the pew 2 rows ahead, where the baker used to sit with his cousin. It's empty. Historians still debate whether clergy during comet events genuinely believed in divine wrath or simply used the moment to steer the masses. Either way, it worked. The people are listening, even if they're not quite ready to speak. That evening you spot someone you haven't seen in weeks. The widow. She walks past the well basket in hand back straight. No one throws stones. No one hisses. In fact, a few people nod awkwardly. One even says, "Evening." It's surreal. She nods back, but her face doesn't soften. And why would it? Just because the sky changed doesn't mean people did. But she walks on, and you realize survival has its own gravity. You don't have to forgive. You just have to keep moving. There's something odd that starts to happen as the comet fades. People begin to collect things. Bits of stone, coins, old prayers scratched into bark, even a scrap of parchment with a crude drawing of the comet, saved like a relic. You see children burying shiny rocks and saying, "For when it comes back." It's not fear anymore. It's remembrance. A kind of myth-making in real time. You pass by Jorika's hut again. Yes, he's still alive, and see him planting herbs, singing to himself. You don't stop, but you hear the tune. It's about a river that sings only when the sky is cracked. Poetic, if cryptic. Jorik always did have a flair for the theatrical. You help rebuild a wall that collapsed last week during the winds. The mortar is still soft. Your hands are blistered, but it feels good. Grounding. Beside you, the weaver's boy works silently. Then suddenly, he says, "I think it left something behind." You ask, "What?" He shrugs. "Not up there. In us." You don't reply. Not because you disagree, but because you think he's right. And that frightens you more than the comet ever did. Later, you overhear travelers talking at the edge of the woods. They speak of another village 2 days west, said their comet was blue, not red, said it came with frost and howling dogs, said a child was born with eyes that glowed, probably just tails. But still, you file it away, because comets don't just leave physical marks. They leave myths. And myths, as you've seen, spread faster than light. You wonder what stories your village will pass down and what parts they'll conveniently forget. That night you find yourself under the stars again. But this time, it's different. The sky is darker, calmer. The comet's tail is faint, barely a smudge now, a ghost of what it was. You lie in the grass, arms behind your head, and listen to the wind. No voices, no screams, no bells, just quiet. But it's not empty quiet. It's earned quiet, the kind that comes after a storm when everyone checks to see what's still standing. You're still standing. You survived. And now you get to decide what that means. There's a question you keep returning to over and over. Why did we react like that? Why the panic, the cruelty, the visions? Some say it's because humans need narrative, a way to make sense of chaos. Others say it's collective guilt, finally unmasked. And some, like Jorik, would say it's just part of the cycle. Comets appear, people change, and then forget. You don't know who's right. But you know one thing, the comet is fading, and whatever comes next will be shaped by what you carry with you and what you choose to let go. You wake up to a still morning, no bells, no clouds. The sky has swallowed the comet almost completely. Now what was once a burning streak across the heavens is now just a faint shimmer, barely visible, unless you squint. But even though it's almost gone, its absence is loud. Because now comes the strangest part of all normalcy, trying to return. And let's be honest, normalcy feels weird now. The market opens again. The tanner unbars his door. Children chase each other across muddy streets, shrieking with glee. The livestock is back in the fields, chewing like nothing ever happened. And yet, you watch it all with unease. It's like everyone is wearing their own face again, but wrong. Like the expression doesn't quite fit. Like the mask is on backward. Because how do you go back to selling onions or spinning wool when just last week your neighbor nearly burned a girl at the stake for having mismatched eyes? You walk through town and see it everywhere. Not the comet, the hangover. Some people cling to their panic like it's a warm blanket. You hear the miller muttering about aftershocks. He insists that a second comet will come, this time with plague instead of fire. Others speak of invisible changes. They don't trust the food, or the water, or each other. One man carries a pouch of salt and scatters a pinch before stepping into any building. Another woman refuses to sleep indoors anymore. Says roofs feel too close now. Historians still argue whether mass paranoia was more intense in isolated villages or major cities during comet sightings, but in both places, the effect was undeniable. Behavior rewrote itself, temporarily, sometimes permanently. And you can see it here, etched into new habits. You yourself pause at thresholds now. You look up more often. And you never ever laugh when someone says they feel something in the air. You visit the widow again. Yes, her. She's sewing quietly, sitting by the window. There's a new calm in her hands, a kind of defiance in how gently she threads the needle. She offers you tea. You ask her if she's angry. She nods. You ask her if she's afraid. She says, not anymore. Then she says something that catches you off guard. They only look up when they're afraid. Maybe that's the real curse of the comet, forcing people to remember the sky. You sit in silence after that, because it's true. People rarely notice the stars unless they're afraid they might fall. That night there's a feast, not for the comet exactly, but it feels like a farewell, a we're still here kind of gathering. Torches are lit. Bread is shared. Someone roasts a pig. Children are allowed to stay up past dusk. There's music, too. A lute, a flute, and that one guy with the drum who always hits it a little too loud. You laugh, not because everything's okay, but because you made it. And in that laughter, in the smell of wood smoke and overcooked carrots, you realize something important. People aren't trying to forget. They're trying to overwrite. The village elder gives a toast. She says, the tale has passed and we remain. That must count for something. Everyone cheers. But you notice no one mentions the girl who disappeared. No one speaks of the drawings on the chapel walls. No one brings up the widow or the old woman whose house was burned. Memory here is selective, sharp when it serves comfort, blurry when it doesn't. Still, you raise your mug with everyone else. Because tonight isn't about truth. It's about relief. And relief, no matter how flawed, is still welcome. You sneak away from the fire and wander toward the pond. It's quiet there, and the water is still. You look at your reflection. It looks like you, but not quite. You've aged a little, not in years, in weight, the weight of witnessing, of knowing what people are capable of, not just cruelty, but tenderness too. Panic, sure, but also protection. You remember the boy who shared his bread with the accused girl, the woman who shouted down a mob, the old man who stood guard at the chapel for 3 nights in a row alone. The comet revealed the worst, but also the best, sometimes in the same person. Maybe that's its true legacy, not destruction, but mirror. You hear footsteps. It's the weaver's boy again. He sits beside you without a word and throws a stone into the pond. Do you think it'll come back? He asks. You nod. Not today. Not tomorrow. But someday, yes. And when it does, he doesn't ask. He just stares at the ripples. Then quietly, I hope we're different by then. You don't say anything, because you hope that too. The comet's final thread fades the next morning. You catch it just before the sun rises, a faint silvery scar dissolving into daylight. By mid-morning, the sky is blue again, empty, ordinary. And yet, something in you aches. Because no matter how terrifying the comet was, it was also magnificent, mysterious, alive in a way that most days aren't. You watch the villagers carry on with their routines, fetching water, grinding grain, gossiping about the apothecary's beard, and you think maybe the comet gave you a kind of clarity, a sense of how fragile and how wild life can be. You'll miss that feeling, even if it came wrapped in dread. You visit Jorik one last time. He's sweeping his doorway, humming something tuneless. When he sees you, he nods. You ask, was it just a comet? He says, is anything ever just what it is? You both sit in silence. Then he adds, they'll write songs about this. Not us, maybe, but someone. And you know he's right. Already someone in town is carving a star into their walking stick. Already a child is drawing spirals in the dirt and calling it comet dust. Already the story is changing, and that's how memory works. Not to record, but to transform. You walk home slowly. The sky is clean. The wind smells of wood and sheep and time. And though the comet is gone, you know it will always be with you, in the curve of a cloud, in the whisper before sleep, in the strange twitch of fear when the moon seems too bright, because you watched a star fall and the world didn't end. But you did change, and you'll carry that with you like a secret glow just beneath the skin. You survived the comet. And now you begin again. You'd think that once the comet disappeared, people would stop talking about it. But no. If anything, the talking only intensifies. Not in the open. Not anymore. Not like when everyone shouted theories in the square or left drawings in the chapel. No. Now the stories simmer quietly, like stew left overnight. Whispers over fences, half-remembered dreams at breakfast. A strange look passed between two people who clearly saw something more in that sky than just ice and fire. You begin to notice each person has their own version of the comet now. It's no longer the comet. It's their comet. To one woman, it was her dead husband's spirit come back to warn her about the upcoming winter. To a merchant, it was a curse for cutting down too many trees. To the priest, of course, it was divine correction. And to a child, just a sparkly tail in the sky that made the stars feel less lonely. Even your own view of it, once rooted in cautious awe, is shifting. Because once something becomes memory, it loses its sharp corners. You find yourself talking about it with a small smile now. Even the scary bits, the crowd, the screaming, the quiet widow. You leave out the worst parts. You can't help it. That's what we do. We survive history by editing it. The town scribe starts a new project, a formal record of the tail year, as people have started calling it. You see him interviewing elders, sketching charts, transcribing testimonies. You even give him a few words, but you keep it vague. You say things like, "It brought us together, and we learned much, and some were not their best selves." You don't mention the boy who vanished, or the symbols you found carved into your doorframe that one night, or the time you considered running. He nods, scribbles, thanks you. Later, you see him copy your words into a leather-bound book and tuck it onto a high shelf in the chapel. It looks so small, so contained. You wonder how much truth can fit in such neat handwriting. You walk past the apothecary and catch a glimpse of a new bottle on the shelf. It's labeled Comet Salts. You raise an eyebrow. The woman behind the counter winks and says, "Helps with nerves." Or so they say. You chuckle, but you also buy a vial. Not because you believe, because it's nice to pretend. You spend time with people you once ignored. The carpenter's daughter, who swore she saw a man floating in the air during the brightest night. The old shepherd, who claims the comet spoke to his dog. Even Jorik, who now walks around with a staff painted silver and whispers to birds. You don't believe any of them really, but you listen, because there's comfort in the strange. And let's face it, after what you've seen, who's to say what's real anymore? Historians still debate whether post-comet visions were hysteria trauma or simply folklore in its first breath. But whatever the cause, they leave a mark, not just on memory, on behavior. One woman has stopped wearing shoes altogether, says the earth hums now, and she wants to feel it directly. A man cuts his beard for the first time in 20 years, claims the comet took the last of his regrets. A girl collects feathers, convinced the comet's tail was made of bird light. You nod. You don't correct. You just accept. You start dreaming more. Not nightmares, just strange dreams. In one, the sky opens like a curtain and a staircase drops down. You walk up it barefoot. At the top, you meet yourself, but older, grayer, smiling. In another, you sit at a dinner table with stars instead of food. Each one burns your fingers, but you eat them anyway. You tell Jorik about the dreams. He says, that's just your brain catching up to the truth. You don't ask what truth. You're not sure you want to know. At dusk one evening, you climb the tallest hill behind the village. It's the place where you first watched the comet in silence, when it was just a bright scratch against velvet night. The hill is empty now. You sit there, knees pulled to your chest, and wait. For what? You're not sure. A sign, a whisper, a second comet. But nothing comes. Just a slow wind and the rustle of distant trees and a single star blinking like it knows too much. You sigh. And for the first time in weeks, you don't feel watched. You feel held. When you return home, you light a single candle. You don't need it. There's enough moonlight to see. But the flame is comforting. Because light, real human-sized light, is something you can control. Unlike comets, unlike mobs, unlike fear. You sit with it for a while. Just you and the candle and the soft creak of wood and the warm smell of beeswax. And for a moment you believe everything will be all right. Not because someone said so, but because you're here and the sky is dark, and that in its own quiet way is a blessing. The seasons begin to shift. You notice it first in the wind. It has that bite now, the one that curls beneath your clothes and hints at cold mornings to come. The leaves on the edge of the village begin to crisp turning yellow in clumps like they're too tired to stay green. The comet's departure feels more final now, because it isn't just gone, it's being replaced by frost, by chores, by birthdays and repairs and taxes and rain. You hear fewer stories now, fewer mentions of lights in the sky or signs in tea leaves. The scribe closes his record book and returns to cataloging grain supplies. The widow sells dried herbs. Yorick still wears silver, but even he's stopped humming to stones. And you start forgetting small things. Not the big stuff, the shouting, the visions, the near disasters. No, those memories are carved deep. But the comet's color, you can't quite place it anymore. Was it red, orange, kind of icy gold? Funny how something so vivid could fade so fast. One morning you find a drawing. It's been left on your doorstep, roughly sketched in charcoal on old parchment. A long-tailed star streaks across a sky filled with open mouths, some laughing, some screaming, some silent. You recognize the style. The blacksmith's daughter. You'd almost forgotten her knack for drawing. You look at the picture for a long time, then pin it to your wall. Because even if the town wants to move on, someone should remember. Down at the river, you run into two farmers, arguing not about crops, but about history. One says the comet came before the sickness. The other swears the sickness came first. A third passerby chimes in and insists there was no sickness at all, just a string of bad stomachs. They ask what you remember. You shrug, because they're all wrong, and also a little right. That's how it always is. Historians still argue whether comets caused famine and disease, or whether they were just convenient coincidences. But here in this village, people remember what fits their narrative, what comforts them, what makes them seem wise. So you let them argue and quietly walk on. There's a new child in the village. You hadn't noticed the pregnancy, or maybe you did and just forgot. The baby has unusually dark eyes and a birthmark on the back that some say looks exactly like a shooting star. You're not sure what it looks like, but you agree anyway, because it makes the woman smile. They name the child Cometa. You think it's a bit on the nose, but endearing, and maybe that's the point. The chapel replaces its roof. You help carry shingles. Your shoulders sore from the weight. As you pause to rest, the priest leans beside you and asks, "Do you think we passed the test?" You don't answer right away, because you're not sure what the test was. Survival kindness, not turning on each other completely. You finally say, "We're still here, that has to count." He nods, doesn't smile, just walks away with a fresh bundle of wood. Later that week, the miller's son hosts a play. He and the children act out the comet's arrival, complete with painted tails and dramatic screams. Someone bangs a pot behind a curtain to simulate thunder. One boy falls over and pretends to melt. The crowd laughs. You laugh. And something about that makes your throat tighten, because laughter means distance. It means the fear is far enough away now to be funny. That's good. That's healthy. But it's also a little sad. You look around at the crowd, parents chuckling, arms folded, elders shaking their heads with nostalgic disbelief, and the children wide-eyed acting out a terror they never truly felt. The future learning the past through pantomime. That night you passed the square. The post where someone had been tied up weeks ago is gone. You hadn't noticed when it vanished, but now that you do, you can't stop looking at the empty patch of earth where it once stood. You kneel down, run your fingers through the dirt. It's just soil, just roots and ants and crushed stone. But for a moment, it feels sacred, because people may erase signs of shame, but the ground remembers. You visit the pond again. It's colder now. The reeds stiff, the surface half frozen. You skim a stone and watch it skip once, twice, then sink. The boy with feathered hair is there too. Older now, somehow. He doesn't say much anymore, but he leaves you a gift, a small box carved from bone shaped like a star. You open it when he's gone. Inside a tiny mirror, you stare at your reflection. It stares back, older, wiser, still you, but with something else behind the eyes. A glow, a scar. Hard to say. You stop checking the sky as much, not because you don't care, but because you've learned something. The next comet will come when it wants to. It won't ask permission. It won't wait for your schedule. And when it does arrive, it will find you older, maybe stronger, maybe a little more ready, but also just as vulnerable, because the sky will always be bigger than your roof, and fear, like fire, always finds a way through cracks. Still tonight, the stars are calm, and you let yourself believe that's enough, just for now, just until the tale returns. You wake to the sound of frost, not wind, not bird song, just frost, thin and crisp, creeping across the edges of your window like an uninvited guest. You sit up slowly, blanket tied around your shoulders, and exhale a foggy breath. The air bites, and there it is again, the feeling. Not fear, not quite. Just a hum beneath your ribs, a memory reactivating itself like a candle lit in an empty room. Winter has arrived, and even though the comet is long gone, you can still feel it, like a bruise that aches when it rains. The villagers are quieter now, not solemn, just inward. The days are short. The sun feels reluctant. People walk faster, speak softer, and keep their eyes low, not out of shame, but preservation, like they're conserving energy or trust. You visit the baker. He's selling loaves shaped like stars. Comet bread, he calls it, made with honey and a little ash from the hearth for flavor and memory. It tastes oddly comforting, slightly smoky. You ask if he made it for a reason. He says people remember better when they chew. You buy 2 loaves because he's right. You spend more time indoors, wrapped in wool, listening to wood creak, watching steam rise from your cup, and in the quiet, the stories return, not loudly, just enough to keep you company. You remember the widow's face eyes like lit glass. You remember the chapel symbols drawn in soot and fear. You remember the silver staff, the missing boy, the echo of silence after the comet faded. Historians still argue whether comets caused permanent psychological effects in rural, medieval populations, or whether those were simply misattributed episodes of pre-existing conditions. Either way, the effects lingered, not just in nightmares, but in art, in routine, in belief, and you are no exception. One night, a knock at your door. It's the scribe. He's holding a new book, not a ledger, a story. He's written a tale about the comet, but this time it's a fable, a celestial fox who ran too fast across the sky and burned its tail. It came to Earth seeking a cure only to discover that humans feared fire more than they loved stars. It's beautiful. Sad, too. He asks if you want to contribute a chapter. You say yes, not because you have a story, but because you're ready to find one. You begin to write, slowly. You describe the comet as a visitor unwanted, perhaps, but not malicious. You call it a test, a teacher, a mirror. You draw small maps of the nights when it shone brightest. You list names, not all of them real, but all of them important. You write about the girl with the strange eyes. You don't say what happened to her. You let the reader imagine, because sometimes mystery is kinder than memory. Outside, snow begins to fall, softly at first, then thick, heavy. It blurs the edges of things. Paths disappear, roofs soften, trees wear white coats, and under that blanket, the comet fades even more. You see fewer traces now. The painted staffs have peeled. The comet salts have run out. Children born after its passing don't know its name. You overhear one boy ask, "Was it like lightning?" "No," says an old woman. "It was slower, sadder, brighter than fear." The boy nods and goes back to playing with a wheel of frozen mud. Just like that, the past becomes bedtime stories. You spend a morning organizing. Old clothes, broken spoons, a bundle of feathers you don't remember collecting. A bit of ash in a jar labeled Comet Night. You pause at that one. Open the jar. Sniff. It smells like charred wood and forgotten hopes. You smile and put it back because you're not ready to throw it away. Not yet. At the edge of the village, someone's built a tower. Crude, crooked, made from leftover stones and driftwood and some windows that don't match. But it stands, tall enough to see the sky without climbing the hill. They call it the sky chair. People take turns sitting in it at dusk, watching nothing in particular. You try it one night. The seat is cold, the wind is harsh, but the stars feel closer. You sit for a long time thinking nothing, feeling everything. When you return home, you find something by your door again, another drawing. This one shows a person sitting in a tower surrounded by birds with comet tails. It's you, Sort of. The style's improved. More shading, better proportions. You turn the paper over. No signature, just 3 words, still looking up. And maybe that's what this whole season is about. Not forgetting, not moving on, but looking up even when there's nothing to see. Especially then, because one day there will be another streak in the sky. And next time you'll remember, not with fear, but with a kind of reverence, like recognizing an old enemy or an old friend, depending on the light. It's hard to pinpoint exactly when people stop whispering about the comet. One day it's just not mentioned anymore. Not in prayer, not in passing, not even in the bartering banter between stalls at the market. Life reclaims its rhythm, and you, like everyone else, fall into step. But still, on colder nights when the fire burns low and the air has that sharp, metallic hush, your thoughts wander skyward. You find yourself checking the stars out of habit, more than hope, just to make sure they're behaving, just to confirm that they're all where they should be. So far they are, mostly. The old widow who once wailed at the comet's brightest hour now teaches sewing to the local girls. You pass her cottage one morning and hear laughter, light, unburdened, as if fear had never clung to these walls. You pause to listen, smile at the sound. But something inside you knows her memory is just as sharp as yours. She simply chooses what to speak aloud and what to keep folded quietly like a letter tucked into the seam of a dress. The town decides to host a festival, not for the comet. That would be too obvious, too bold. No, they call it the Long Night Feast. A midwinter gathering to welcome the lengthening of days. Food songs, carved lanterns in the shapes of animals and stars. You volunteer to help with decorations. There's comfort in the repetition. Cutting, stringing, lighting. You work alongside people you used to avoid. People who once shouted things no one repeats anymore. People who are just as eager to turn page as you are. And during the feast, as candles flicker and cider flows, someone starts telling a story. It's not labeled comet lore, but it's unmistakable. They speak of a burning fox in the sky, of a glowing tail that tried to warn the world, of people who didn't listen until it was nearly too late. The crowd murmurs, laughs. A few shake their heads. One child starts to cry, but the storyteller winks and says, "It's just a tale," and everyone nods, as if that makes it less real. You wander outside, mug of something hot in your hands. The snow is fresh. The stars are ordinary, and that's oddly reassuring. You sit on a wooden bench, half buried in frost, and look up, not hoping to see anything, not dreading either, just looking and remembering. Because sometimes the most powerful thing isn't believing, it's witnessing and surviving. Historians still argue whether the comet of that era, be it Halley or an unnamed interloper, actually impacted behavior across medieval Europe, or if it merely provided an excuse for other simmering tensions. But you've seen the change firsthand. It's subtle, quiet, like erosion or healing. Not everyone has grown kinder. Some people simply forgot their cruelty. Others carried it forward, polished it into charm, used it in jokes. But some transformed. You've seen it in the way the scribe looks at clouds now, or the way the blacksmith sings when he works, or how the carpenter leaves food near the river. Small things, sacred things. One evening, Jorik finds you outside. He hasn't worn the silver staff in weeks. Instead, he carries a bundle of dried herbs and a tattered journal. Sits beside you without speaking for a long time. Then finally says, "You know it could come back." You nod. He continues, "And maybe next time it won't be so gentle." You chuckle. "That was gentle." He grins, relatively. Then he hands you the journal. Inside are drawings, notes, dreams, a comet tracker, predictions, poems, a recipe for something called tail shine tea, which includes lemon salt and 3 crushed blue petals. You ask what the journal is for. He shrugs. Next time. Or someone else's first time. You keep it, because maybe that's what this has all been, a warning, not to forget, but also a whisper to prepare. Not for disaster, for wonder. A letter arrives from a nearby village. They've seen something strange in the sky, small, fast flickering. You fold the letter, put it away, then go outside. Look up. Nothing tonight, but something about the wind feels alert, like the world is watching itself. You begin to teach a small group of children once a week. Nothing formal, just stories, sky lore, simple star maps, the old myths and the new ones people made up last year when they were afraid. One girl asks, "Were you scared?" You pause, then say, "Yes, but I didn't stay scared." She smiles, then asks, "What would you do if it came back?" You look around at the circle of eager faces, at the stars above, at your own breath in the cold, and say, "This time I'd wave." The days grow longer now. Not by much, just minutes really, but enough that you notice. Shadows shift. Snow melts in patches. The river creaks beneath its icy shell, threatening to run free again. And in this gentle return of light, your mind stirs with an old question. What was the comet trying to say? It's not a question with a useful answer, not one you'll write down or share in town, but it lingers. A soft whisper in your chest, repeating not in words but in feeling. You visit the chapel again, not for prayer, not for confession, just to sit. The priest doesn't mind, he's grown quieter too. His sermons shorter, his eyes softer. You notice he no longer reads from the old texts during winter. He speaks from memory now, personal memory, stories of what he saw, what you all saw. And every so often, he uses the word comet, not loudly, not theatrically, just enough to make the air shift. In the corner of the chapel stands a new tapestry. It's not as grand as the stained glass or gold leaf, but it's striking in its own way. Woven in coarse wool and faded thread, it shows a sky filled with flame and fear, and below people holding hands, some pointing, some running, one simply standing still. You recognize the figure. It's a stylized you, or someone who felt the same. You ask, who made it? No one knows. It just appeared one day. Historians still argue whether tapestries from this period were community efforts or the work of a single dedicated artisan with some patronage and a grudge. Whatever the truth, this one speaks in silence. You sit beneath it for a while. Let it loom. Let it remember for you. Back outside, you find a trail of smooth stones laid out like breadcrumbs across the square. You follow them to the hill, to that hill where you once stood trembling under a sky that threatened to crack. Now it's just a hill, snow-dusted, breeze-blown, peaceful. Someone's planted a stake at the top, carved into the shape of a comet, with a tail curling like a question mark. Beneath it, a leather-bound book tied shut with cord. A sign says, "Add your story." You hesitate. Then untie the cord. Inside pages of entries, drawings, scribbled dates, bad poetry, half-remembered visions. One child's note simply reads, "The comet made my brother nice for one whole week." You smile and write your own. I saw the sky burn and still slept that night. I saw people scream and still woke the next morning. I saw a comet and survived not just the fire, but the quiet after. You close the book and tie the cord again. A traveling merchant arrives in town, says he's come from 3 villages away. Saw something strange last week. Thought he'd check if the rumors were true. You exchange a glance with the blacksmith. The same thought passes silently between you. Already, the merchant stays for a day bartering trinkets and tales. You listen to him spin a story about a 2-tailed comet seen over a frozen lake, trailing sparks like molten rain. It's probably exaggerated, but you don't correct him, because what if it's not? Later, you overhear a conversation near the well. 2 women are discussing signs. One says her hens laid eggs shaped like tears. The other says her dreams are filled with blue fire. Neither sounds afraid, just expectant. You walk away quickly, not wanting to feed it. But later that night, your dreams are bright too. You take the journal Jorik gave you and begin charting things again. Not because you believe a return is imminent, but because you've grown to love the ritual, sketching stars, noting cloud shapes, drawing the horizon line in soft pencil. There's calm in it, discipline, and hope. Maybe the next time the sky burns, someone will open this book and feel ready. Maybe it will be a child. Maybe it will be you, older, grayer, slower, but still looking up. At the next market, you sell a few drawings. People call them comet prints. One shows a woman walking beneath a blazing sky, completely calm. Another shows a village huddled together, while a fox with a flaming tail watches from the clouds. They sell faster than your usual work. You pretend to act surprised, but you know the truth. The comet never really left. It just settled into fabric, into song, into shared myth. Even as it vanished, it planted itself. And now it blooms in stories. That evening, a stranger passes through town. Young, quiet, eyes wide with wonder. He asks where the comet fell. You smile and say, it didn't fall. It visited. He looks confused, then intrigued, then walks toward the chapel. As he disappears around the corner, you think, that's how it starts again. Not with fear, with curiosity, and this time maybe that's the better spark. The mornings arrive a little earlier, now, slipping in under the door frame like shy guests. You find yourself waking before the bells, not from noise or nightmares, but from the strange peace that has settled into the bones of the village. Even the animals seem calmer. The chickens, long suspicious of shadow and cloud, now peck with carefree abandon. The goats nap in the sun like royalty. And the crows, who once shrieked at the sky like little prophets, now merely gossip among themselves. You watch them from the window. You sip something warm. And you think maybe this is what recovery looks like. But still, there's a restlessness just beneath the thaw. A stir in the snowmelt. You feel it when you walk past the chapel and see new scratchings in the stone. Not vandalism symbols, ones you recognize. A crescent intersecting a spiral, a tail wrapped around a star. They weren't there last week. You run your fingers over them. The grooves are deep, fresh. Someone is still watching the sky, and they want others to know. At the market, you spot a traveling puppet show. You stop to watch. The puppets are crude, made of sticks and straw. But the story is clear. A comet falls from the heavens and brings confusion, fire, and ultimately community. The villagers rebuild. The sky clears. The comet waves goodbye. Children cheer. Adults smile some nervously. One man claps too hard. It's a little surreal. You lean toward the puppeteer during packing and ask where he got the story. He says, everywhere. Then adds, it's how people sleep better. You pass a young woman painting the side of her cottage. She's drawn flames, but stylized, graceful, like dancing ribbons. Above them, stars arranged into spirals, crosses, and something that looks suspiciously like a fox's face. She catches your gaze, grins, then throws a splash of blue across the fire, turning it into something between ocean and sky. You say nothing, but inside, something shifts. The fear is still here. But so is art. And art wins, eventually, even over fire. You receive a letter. The seal is cracked, the parchment crinkled by weather. It's from the next town over, a request for stories about the year of the comet. They're compiling them into a record. You're invited to contribute. You hesitate, not because you lack words, but because you don't know where to start. Do you begin with the night? The sky hissed. Do you describe the way Jorik held his staff like a sword made of panic? Do you tell them about the girl who vanished, or the goat that barked like a dog for 3 days straight. Eventually, you write a page, then 2, then 12, and when you're done, you sign it. One who looked up and didn't blink. A debate breaks out in the square. 2 farmers, both older than your memory, arguing whether the comet was a warning or a fluke. One says it signaled God's disappointment. The other says it was just gas and dust. They go back and forth louder and louder until a child nearby pipes up, maybe it was just bored. Everyone stops, then laughs. Argument over. Historians still argue whether medieval people believed comets were divine portents or misunderstood natural events wrapped in spiritual language. But in your village, people now discuss it like weather, sometimes heavy, sometimes gentle, sometimes unforgettable, but always past. You decide to make your own tapestry, not large, not grand, just something to hang above your hearth. You stitch slowly, each thread a memory, a flame, a hope. When it's done, it shows 3 figures, one kneeling, one running, one reaching up. Above them, a sky streaked not with fear, but with color, blues and purples, gold and green. No comet exactly, just movement, just awe. The next time it snows, you walk outside barefoot, just for a moment, just to feel it, the cold, the crunch, the reminder that this is the same earth you stood on months ago trembling, and now you stand tall, alive, witnessed, changed. That night, a new dream. You're standing on the same hill, but this time the comet is close, so close you can hear it singing. And it's not a dirge, it's not a warning, it's not even music, really. Just a sound that says, you're still here, and you wake with a smile. Because you are. You've stopped looking for the comet every night, not because you've forgotten, not because you've stopped caring, but because now you know it isn't always visible to be present. It exists in the curve of a new roof beam, built stronger after last year's storms. It lives in the herb gardens, now grown slightly wider, just in case the markets close again. It hides in the glances people share when a dog howls too suddenly, or when a spark flies up from the hearth just a little too high. And when you think about it, maybe the comet's gift wasn't fear. Maybe it was memory, the kind that lives in the hands, in how people build, in how they wait. You help rebuild a neighbor's fence, not because you're particularly good at it, but because, as he puts it, you've got steady hands. The comet didn't take that from you. He grins. You both pretend it's a joke. But there's something true in the way he says it. You remember when that same neighbor used to glare at you during town meetings? Used to mutter things about sky watchers and bad omens. Now he shares soup. Trust takes strange paths. At the far edge of town, near the stream, someone's carved a stone bench. It wasn't there last season. It faces the sky. A plaque reads, "For those who kept looking up." No one admits to placing it there, but flowers keep appearing beside it. Sometimes drawings, sometimes coins, sometimes just stillness. You sit there one dusk and find a folded piece of paper on the seat. It reads, "I saw it too. Thank you for reminding me I wasn't alone." You keep the note, add it to your journal. The festival comes again, the second long night feast. This time it feels different, less like a ritual, more like a reunion. There are comet-shaped cookies, of course, lanterns made from dyed paper and bits of mica. A new song written by the blacksmith's daughter that sounds suspiciously like a love ballad to a flaming sky. People dance, not frantically, but with joy. With that kind of relief that only arrives after remembering how bad things were and realizing they aren't anymore. You clap along. You even smile without looking behind you, because nothing's chasing you now. Just time, and you've made peace with that. Historians still argue whether traditions born from fear eventually evolve into celebrations of resilience, or if they just soften at the edges with forgetfulness. You'd like to believe this one is the former, because the comet wasn't erased. It was woven into food, into song, into jokes about skybeards and don't blink or it'll return. You hear one child ask, "Will the comet come for my birthday?" Another replies, "Only if you invite it." That's how you know you've all moved on. Not because you stopped talking about it, but because you can laugh about it. You take the drawing from last year, the one with the person in the tower, surrounded by birds with comet tails, and frame it. It hangs by your door now, a reminder, not of fear, but of sight. A small group begins meeting in the old mill once a week, not a church, not a club. They just gather to share stories, dreams, old prophecies, and new poems. Someone reads a tale about a comet made of tears that floods a village and the people who learn to swim in them. Another tells of a creature who builds a home from fallen starlight. No one corrects them. No one scoffs. It's not about truth. It's about remembering together. You start attending regularly. You even read once. Your voice doesn't shake. Yorick has gone quiet again. Not in worry, not in isolation, just thoughtful. He spends hours by the river skipping stones and humming under his breath. He tells you he's writing a new guidebook not for comets, but for calm. Turns out, he says, we're worse at surviving peace than we are at surviving fire. You help him edit, because you know what he means. A bird lands on your windowsill one morning. Its feathers are bright, strange, iridescent. It stares in for a long moment, then flies off. You can't explain why it makes you smile, but you write about it anyway. In the margins of your journal, you draw tiny feathers and label them hope. Later, you hear someone say, "If the comet comes again, I hope it finds us ready." And you nod to yourself, not because you are ready, but because next time you won't be alone in the waiting. Spring settles in quietly, like a cat curling on your lap without asking. You barely notice it at first. A bud here, a softened breeze there. Then, one morning, The last trace of frost has vanished from your windowsill, and the whole world smells like dirt and possibility. It's been nearly a full year since the sky burned. Since then, no one's claimed to see another comet, but that doesn't mean the sky has stopped speaking. You just have to listen differently now. In the town square, the fountain is flowing again. Children toss in pebbles and wishes. One girl whispers, "I hope the next comet is pink." Her friend says, "I hope it brings cake." And just like that, cosmic catastrophe becomes bedtime folklore again. You're oddly proud. Maybe this is how resilience works, not in forgetting the terror, but in painting over it with frosting and laughter. Someone starts building a sundial on the hill, not to replace the chapel's bells, not to time anything important, just to remember that light returns. You help carry the stones, stack them carefully, not as high as the tower that once shook under comet light, but high enough to cast a shadow and a memory. Yorick reads a new poem at the weekly gathering. He calls it Sky's Gift. In it, the comet is a messenger, but not of doom. It brings a question, a dare. Will you keep looking up after I'm gone? The room is quiet for a long moment afterward. Then someone claps. Then everyone does. And for the first time, the sound doesn't echo with relief, but with joy. You take a walk beyond the town's edge, past the familiar trails, past the places that once felt dangerous to leave behind. You walk until you find a field where wild flowers have pushed through the thawed ground. And there in the center, someone's left a circle of stones, not random, deliberate, a comet's shape traced in rock. At its center, a single candle stub, long since burned. You sit beside it, breathe, whisper, "Still here." The wind answers with a hush. Historians still argue whether the cultural shift after celestial events stems from collective trauma or symbolic redefinition. But here, it's simpler. People changed because they chose to. Not all, but enough. You see it in the old baker who now gives out loaves shaped like stars on feast days. You hear it in the fiddler who wrote a tune called Comet Waltz. You feel it in the warmth between neighbors who once wouldn't have shared a glance, now swapping seeds and stories as naturally as breath. The boy from the other village visits again. Older now, taller. He brings a small metal box and asks if you can help him build a sky watcher. You both work in silence for hours, fashioning lenses, adjusting angles, laughing when it collapses for the 5th time. Eventually, you get it upright, balanced, sturdy. You both stare into the sky through the glass. There's nothing there but blue, and that's enough. You make a pact. If the comet ever returns, you'll meet here again, on this hill, beside this little device, and watch it together. He nods solemnly. You shake on it. It feels sacred, not because of the comet, because of the choice. Later that week, a new baby is born. Her name is Leora, which means light. No one says it aloud, but everyone thinks it. What a perfect name for the year after the fire. You knit her a little cap, embroider a tiny flame on the front. The mother laughs. I guess we're not pretending anymore, are we? You shrug. Maybe it's better this way. That night you light a candle. Not because the power's out. Not because you're afraid. Just to honor the dark. Because without it the stars are harder to see. And whether or not they ever flare with fire again, you'll keep looking. You'll keep remembering. You'll keep watching. Because sometimes the most powerful act isn't survival. It's witnessing without turning away. There's a new kind of silence in the village now. Not the silence of fear, like when the comet first appeared and people held their breath waiting for the sky to fall. This one is gentler. It's the kind that hums under laughter, that wraps around you in the quiet moments between tasks, in the pause after a good story, in the stillness of early morning, when the dew hasn't quite given up its hold on the grass. You've started to crave that silence. It's where the memory of the comet lives now, not in shouts or omens or prophecies, but in the hush that follows, knowing something vast once looked down on you and then passed by. One of the farmers invites you to see something in his barn. You hesitate. The last time someone did that, it involved a 3-headed goat puppet and a very bad reenactment of the comet landing in a cabbage patch. But this time it's different. He's built a model of the village, a full replica. Every cottage, every road, even the chapel painted with tiny flecks of gold leaf. And at the edge, a glowing comet suspended on wire tail, curled back over the town like a question mark. He flips a switch, and a tiny mechanism makes the comet move slowly across the sky. The effect is surprisingly emotional. It helps me remember, he says, rubbing the back of his neck, but not in the scary way. You nod, because that makes sense now. Remembering doesn't have to mean reliving. The tavern has a new drink on the menu, Comet's Kiss. It's got cinnamon and something smoky. Tastes like how the comet felt. Warm and strange and hard to explain. You take a sip and feel a sudden urge to cry. Not from sadness, just from recognition. You weren't crazy. You saw it. You felt it. And now it lives in your taste buds, too. The town council hosts a vote, not about taxes, not about trade routes. They want to rename the little hill where the comet first showed its face. There's debate. Some say call it Fire Watch. Others prefer Star Rise. A few push for the hill that waited. The vote ends in a tie. They settle on Comet's Rest. You like that because it doesn't assume the comet was evil or kind, just that it stopped there, and that somehow matters. You plant something on Comet's Rest, a tree, a young one, spindly and shy. You don't expect it to grow much. The soil's rocky. But still, you place your hands in the dirt. You press it in, because it feels right. The comet burned a scar into the sky. This is your answer, roots. A stranger comes through town again. A scholar this time. She wears ink-stained gloves and carries more books than bags. She's interviewing anyone who'll talk, trying to catalog the cultural echoes of the celestial event. You snort, but you talk to her anyway. Tell her about the foxes, about the tower, about the puppet that looked suspiciously like the mayor. She laughs, scribbles furiously, then says, "You know most villages don't remember this clearly. They forget, or pretend it was something else." You nod. You've seen that too, but not here. Here, the sky still speaks, even if only in whispers. Later that night, you reread your journal. So many entries from that time. So many lines where your writing shakes the ink smudged by a hand that clearly wasn't steady. But also poems, drawings, maps of stars you were sure would change their place. You don't throw it away, but you do close it, tie it with string, place it on a shelf. Because sometimes closure looks like putting the story down. A child asks you, "What do you think the comet wanted?" You pause, think, then say, "Maybe it just wanted to be seen." She considers that, then says, "Like me when I wear my pink hat," and runs off giggling. You smile, because, yes, maybe exactly like that. That night before sleep, you look out the window. The stars are ordinary again, just dots, just light. But somewhere between them, you imagine a path, a curve, a trail. And for a moment, your chest fills with something quiet and impossible. You whisper into the dark, "If you ever come back, I'll be here." Then you turn off the lamp and sleep deeply, without dreams. Because some nights, peace is enough. The rhythm of your days has settled into something soft. The town no longer watches the sky with suspicion, but with familiarity, like glancing at an old friend across a crowded room. You still look up sometimes. It's hard not to, but now it's habit, not fear. Reverence, maybe, or just curiosity. The sun rises, and you light the hearth. The bread rises, and you hum a tune. You've started adding more spices to your stews, ones you used to hoard in case trade was interrupted again. But those days are gone. You've decided that flavor is worth the risk. Because survival is no longer the goal, living is. You notice small things returning. The cobbler who stopped making wedding shoes after the comet year has crafted a new pair. They're soft blue leather with tiny stars embroidered at the toe. He leaves them in the chapel as a gift, no explanation, just there. A woman who hadn't sung in public since the festival 3 years ago stands at the market and belts out a love ballad like the sky's her audience. And someone, no one's quite sure who, paints a mural on the granary wall, a comet soaring upward, this time not down. Its tail winds into a spiral, then becomes a flower. The message is clear. We remember, but we're not stuck. You take to walking the long path past the river. It winds along the cliffs where the winds are stronger, and the view stretches all the way to the far woods. Some days you pass others there. Some days you don't. You bring a small pouch of breadcrumbs, not for birds, for the fox. You haven't seen it since that night, but the crumbs disappear, neatly, regularly. You're not saying it's definitely the Promi fox from the visions, But you're not saying it isn't either. Some mysteries are better left whole. One afternoon you visit the old stone bench again, the one overlooking the hill where someone carved. For those who kept looking up, there's someone already sitting there. An elderly woman, cloak wrapped tight, her eyes closed. You sit beside her. She opens one eye and says, "Still looking?" You nod. She chuckles. "Silly thing, the sky. So far above us, but somehow it always knows where we live." Then she stands, leaves a sprig of rosemary on the bench, and vanishes down the path. You pick up the rosemary. Keep it. Add it to your journal. The journal's nearly full now. Not with fear or prophecy or dreams of fire, but with recipes, sketches, lists of people you love, and occasionally tiny maps of imagined skies. On one page you write, "The comet didn't destroy the world. It changed its color." Underneath you draw a small flame in rainbow hues. Then close the book. You don't need to write anything more yet. Historians still argue whether the physical traces of comets, craters, scorched trees, disrupted weather matter more than the cultural ones. But here, where no crater was ever found, the aftershocks are louder in behavior than in stone. People walk differently now. They speak more carefully. They dream bigger, oddly enough. You've heard at least 3 villagers say they want to travel next year, not to escape, but to see. The sky changed their view of the ground. Isn't that a strange kind of blessing? The field where the first fire was spotted is growing wildflowers now. No one planted them. They're just there. And they come in comet colors, pale violet streaked gold, deep crimson. One looks like it's glowing. You take a handful home, press them into paper, label each one with a single word before, during, after. You don't show anyone. It's not for sharing, it's for holding. On the longest night of the year, someone suggests a sky-watching party. You expect a few people, maybe a lantern or 2, but nearly the whole village shows up. There's music and mulled cider, and someone's brought tiny comet-shaped pastries dusted with sugar. They crunch like memory. You lie back on a blanket, stare at the stars. Someone to your left sighs and says, "You think it'll come again?" You reply, "Maybe." Then, "But it won't find us, afraid." And the silence that follows is the best kind. Not scared, not heavy, just true. Later, as the fire dies down, you walk home alone. The air is cold, but your steps are steady. No sky fire, no visions, just a whisper in the wind, too soft to decipher. You stop, close your eyes, smile, because you don't need to know what it said. You already understand. You made it through, and you're still looking up. You wake one morning with a peculiar sense of anticipation. No special date, no festival scheduled, just something in the light, maybe. The way the morning sun seems to spill a little more deliberately across the floorboards, like it's showing up for something important. You stretch, crack the window open. The breeze is brisk, smelling faintly of wood smoke and something else you can't quite name, clay, perhaps, change. And that's when you hear the sound, a soft hammering from the village square, rhythmic, confident, joyful, not the hammering of repairs or emergency barricades. This is construction with purpose. Turns out someone is building a sky house, not for watching the stars, not exactly. It's a little round building open on top, like an observatory, but with no lens, no charts, no calculations. Just benches and cushions and wind chimes. A place to sit and feel the sky. It's entirely impractical and entirely perfect. You volunteer to help, obviously. By day 3, a carpenter jokes that the comet may have left, but it clearly took your sense of efficiency with it. You laugh and pass him another plank. Because what's more efficient than stillness, really? The sky house is finished in a week. It smells of cedar and beeswax. Someone adds tiny mosaic tiles around the doorway, forming a spiral that never ends. Children run their fingers along the path, giggling when they lose track of the pattern. You sit inside alone one evening, just for a few minutes. It's oddly loud in its silence, the kind of quiet that holds all the things people didn't say during the comet year. You close your eyes, let them echo gently around you, not haunt you, just settle. You've started dreaming again, not the wild, frantic dreams of fire and eyes in the sky, but calm ones, of floating above the village, of watching people gather, dance, light lanterns. Once you dream of the fox again, it sits beside you in the sky house, watching the sky with the stillness of something that has always known more than you. When you wake, you feel like you've been given a gift. You don't tell anyone, but you write about it with a smile. People begin sharing their own comet memories more openly now. Someone prints a small pamphlet, Tales from the Flame Year. It's not serious, not scholarly. It includes both sincere entries and ones like, "That time I thought the comet was an enormous potato with wings. Your story makes it in, without your name. Just a title, the tower, the fox, and the flame." You find yourself oddly moved, not because you need credit, but because someone remembered and shared. That's enough. Historians still argue whether post-trauma creativity is about healing or processing. But in this village, it's become celebration, a soft rebellion against silence. Murals spread like ivy across old walls. New songs drift through alleyways. Even the blacksmith hums now while he works, and his tune is surprisingly catchy. You begin teaching children how to make star maps, not the scientific ones, your kind. The ones that include imaginary constellations like the dancer, the sleepy goat, and the fox who watched. They eat it up, especially when you tell them every map must include one made-up comet just in case it returns. You catch one girl adding a dozen comets to hers. All different flavors, she explains, in case the sky is hungry. You try not to laugh, fail completely, and decide she'll be mayor one day. You finally clean out the back room of your house, the one you kept just in case. It's full of jars and dried goods, extra boots, folded blankets, your own little apocalypse bunker. You don't throw it all out. That would be silly. But you repurpose it. Hang herbs from the rafters. Set up a little reading chair. Paint one wall in a soft shade of blue. You call it the comet room, not as a shrine, but as a reminder, not of fear, but of preparedness and peace. You sit there often now, tea in hand, remembering what it felt like to not know if the morning would come, and smiling because it did. Late one evening, a breeze carries a sound through the village. Chimes from the sky house. No one's inside. They're just moving, responding to something only they can hear. You step outside, tilt your head up. There's no comet tonight, no fire, no mystery. Just stars, just breath, just you. And honestly, that's enough. More than enough. The village is hosting its first Night of Lights festival. It wasn't your idea, but you're asked to help plan it anyway, because as the baker says, you're the only one who actually talked back to the comet. You're not entirely sure what that means, but you take the compliment. The idea is simple lantern stories and quiet music under the stars. No fireworks, no loud speeches. Just a soft celebration of the sky and the people who endured its fire. You help string up the lanterns, each made from recycled paper and painted with stars, foxes' flames, and, yes, one or two potatoes with wings. Because memory needs both reverence and laughter. Someone suggests hanging a lantern for each person who made it through that year. So you do. One by one. Names whispered as the candles are lit. A few tears, a few smiles, and the flickering glow of dozens of small lights dancing like stars come down to visit. You walk among them, heart full and strangely light. This is what remembrance looks like when it's allowed to breathe. There's a storyteller by the sky house, an elder from another village. She's wrapped in wool and wisdom and wears a pin shaped like a spiral. Her voice is soft, but everyone leans in. She tells a version of the comet tale you've never heard before. In hers, the comet was a seed cast by a sky god, meant to test the soil of the earth, meant to see which hearts would bloom under pressure. And the people they passed. Barely. But they passed, and now the stars are watching curious what the next harvest will be. Children gasp. Adults nod. You smile. Because whether you believe it or not, it feels right, and sometimes that's all a story needs to do. You wander toward Comet's Rest. The young tree you planted is taller now. Leaves like small green promises. Someone's hung wind chimes from a low branch. You sit beneath it, feeling the wind tug gently at your sleeves, and you remember. Not the fire or the fear, not this time. You remember the first time you looked up after really looked and realized you'd survived. You'd changed, but you were still here. Someone approaches. The boy from the other village, now decidedly taller voice, deeper, with a small scar along his jaw that wasn't there before. He holds a flask of warm cider. Still keeping watch, he asks, offering a swig. You nod. He sits beside you, and for a while you say nothing, just sip, just watch. There's peace in that silence, as if the sky itself is exhaling. He eventually says, "They're calling this the comet generation." You laugh, bit dramatic. He shrugs, still kind of true. Then adds, "We're different, aren't we? You don't need to answer." He knows. Historians still argue whether generational shifts like these are measurable. Some say it's in the birth records, others in the folklore. But you think it's in the walking, in the way people step lighter or slower, in the way eyes linger on the sky just a heartbeat longer than they used to. You've watched it happen. You've lived it. That's more evidence than any scroll could hold. As the night deepens, the village slowly quiets. Lanterns dim, one by one. The storyteller finishes her last tale. Children are carried home, heads resting on shoulders, dreams already curling behind closed eyes. And you remain at Comet's Rest, watching the sky, just in case. The stars don't do anything special. They don't need to. Just being there is enough. You take a deep breath, fingers trailing the bark of your tree, then you whisper, "Thank you." Not to the comet, not even to the stars, to yourself, for staying, for growing, for keeping the story alive, but not letting it define you. You rise, stretch, and make your way home. The night behind you, soft as a lullaby. It's morning again. Sunlight seeps gently into your room, brushing across the table where your journal sits, now closed and tied with a ribbon. The air carries the scent of distant rain and blooming things that weren't brave enough to grow during the comet year, but now stretch upward, unafraid. You move slowly today, not out of sadness, but because you can. There's no alarm sounding, no prophecy unfolding, just a village rising to its own rhythm, woven together by the shared thread of afterward. You wash your face in cold water, dry your hands on a towel embroidered with stars, and step out into the world that continued spinning gently, stubbornly, through fire and fear. The market is lively, not bustling exactly, more like content. A little girl tries to sell pebbles, painted to look like tiny comets. Someone buys one out of kindness, and you notice they tuck it into their breast pocket like it's sacred. You stop at a stand and buy honey dark and thick from bees that weathered the same sky as you did. The beekeeper says the flavor changed last year. You believe her. Everything did. You walk by the mural again. It's changed. Someone's added new lines, vines of green and gold threading upward from the comet's tail. Now it doesn't look like a thread at all. It looks like growth, like a comet becoming a tree. You run your fingers along the wall. It feels warm. Or maybe that's just you. You visit the chapel not to pray, but to sit. The windows catch the light in quiet, kaleidoscopic patterns that feel like secrets shared only with the floorboards. You see the pair of blue wedding shoes still tucked in the corner. Someone's left a note in them, still waiting for the right dance. You chuckle. Leave a flower beside them. You're not in a rush anymore. You've learned that some things bloom slower, but more beautifully. You sit beneath the tree on Comet's Rest again, and this time you bring a gift, a small wind chime carved from driftwood and old spoons. It makes a soft, tinny song, nothing dramatic, but enough. You hang it low, where the wind will catch it on the gentlest days. A boy walks past and asks, "Why spoons?" You shrug, because they're useful, even in music. He thinks that's brilliant. You don't correct him. You don't. Later, you pass by the sky house. There's a group inside, laughing, talking, leaning back against cushions that have clearly seen stories soaked into their seams. You pause, then move on. It's theirs now, and that's how it should be. Historians still argue whether comets truly change people or whether people change themselves in response to them. Whether the stars write destinies or just hold up mirrors. You think of all the mirrors you've stood in front of since that day. None of them looked quite the same, and yet all of them reflected you. Maybe that's the point. The last light of day stretches long. It catches on rooftops, puddles, and leaves in a way that feels deliberate, like the sky is painting something just for those paying attention. You're paying attention. You always are. Now, in the distance, the fox appears, just a flicker of red against the grass. It doesn't come close, but it turns to look at you long enough that you wonder, does it know? Then it's gone. But the warmth stays, not just on your skin, but somewhere deeper. You exhale, not in relief, just in rhythm, because you've found your pace again. Your breath doesn't chase or flee. It flows like a story. You light a candle before bed, not because you're afraid of the dark, but because you honor it. It was there with you. You turn back the blankets, climb in, close your eyes, and whisper, "Sleep well," not to yourself, to the comet, wherever it is. You hope it's watching a different village now, one just beginning to understand what you already do. That survival isn't the end of a story. It's the beginning of a gentler one. Now let everything soften. You're not in the village anymore. You're here in your room, the quiet humming like a lullaby through the walls, your heartbeat slow and steady beneath the weight of the blanket. All the flames have gone out. The fires you feared, the ones that once roared in your thoughts, are only warm embers, now steady kind. Let your breath slow. There's no sky to watch tonight, no signs to read, just this moment stretching gently across your body like silk. You've made it through more than you expected, and that matters. The world is quieter now, not because it's empty, but because you're full of knowing, of memory, of resilience. There is no comet in the sky tonight, only stars, only silence, only rest. The fears that once gripped your chest so tightly are now folded up like old letters, still there, but no longer loud. Let your jaw unclench. Let your hands rest. Let your mind drift. You are safe. You are steady. You are still here. And that quietly, gloriously, is everything. Sleep now, dear listener. Let dreams come like comets in reverse, not blazing down from above, but rising gently from the calm within you. Good night.